It is 2:01. I'd like to call the Legislative and Governmental Affairs meeting to order for this May 25th. Now we can take a roll call, please.
Member Chaplin?
Here.
Chair Dessart?
Here.
Member LaPlante?
Here.
Member Renahan?
Here.
Member Salmon? Vice Chair Zay?
Here.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the the May 18th, 2021 Legislative and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting? Motion, anyone?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. Thank you, members Renahan and Zay. Roll call vote, please.
Member Renahan?
Aye.
Member Salmon? Vice Chair Zay?
Aye.
Member Chaplin?
Aye.
Chair Dessart?
Aye.
Member LaPlante?
Aye. All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No.
All right, thank you. By way of the chairman's report, I'd just like to say that DuPage County received its first tranche of the American Rescue Plan money, about $89 million that's sitting in the bank collecting interest. I see that interest in my mind's eye ticking up there. And we are so fortunate to have our federal lobbyist, Bill Viney, with us again to talk about the overview of the American Rescue Plan and to see if there's any new guidelines that have come on since we last heard from him. So welcome, Bill Viney.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, but the Treasury is a lot farther along than I think many people have anticipated at this point. They've been meeting the deadlines, come out with an interim final rule. And what that means is it's what they are proposing for a final rule, but they're still allowing a comment period, which is until I believe July 16th. And so for people that have comments, and many are being submitted, they'll take in the comments after the 16th, they'll reevaluate and issue their final rule. They're still going to be releasing some additional facts, frequently asked questions, regarding a number of things, but maybe before I jump into this, and I want to keep this pretty high level, but I'm happy to answer some specific questions today. Interest was one of the questions that people had. On the CARES Act, you had the money and you were able to keep that interest. So like the CARES Act money, you still are able to keep those dollars. Any interest that's earned, you keep. And it's my understanding that it will not be bound to the same guidelines as the rest of the money that you received from the Rescue Act. So you'll have a little bit more freedom with those interest dollars that you're earning than you will on some of the others. As I think we've discussed before, there are a few main areas that they really want to focus on. One is, I'm not going to try to give a slideshow, but you'll probably see slides similar to this as sort of pandemic response, right? Then there is, sort of I would say, kind of stabilizing the economic side of things. And the last thing is infrastructure. But what they mean by infrastructure is really broadband infrastructure for unserved and underserved pockets. So if you have any areas of the county that don't have connectivity, more common in rural and highly urban areas than it is, and typically you find in suburban, but suburban still has this. And then water infrastructure. And water infrastructure is anything that would apply to state and tribal assistance grants, if you're familiar with that, which is an EPA administered program run through the states. So anywhere, think of wastewater, stormwater, collections, treatment, all that kind of stuff. The other infrastructure that is a part of this, and the reason I'm starting with infrastructure is because there's often, it seems to get a lot of questions about infrastructure, is for lost revenue. When you're replacing lost revenue, and so if you're using some of your CARES Act dollars to replace lost revenue for the county, you can then, in fact, use those dollars for lost revenue or for infrastructure. But generally outside of that, well, one more other area that you can use for infrastructure, if it is to meet the pandemic and COVID, crisis. So if you have to build a new, let's say, a new facilities plant at, I don't think the convalescent center or the care center has one, but if they had a facilities plant and needed to be upgraded to meet demand, you'd be able to do those sorts of things, but it has to be directly tied. If you needed to reconfigure the rooms at the care center, if you need to reconfigure things in the jail, again, as long as it's directly related to kind of the pandemic and pandemic response, those are the types of projects that you can do infrastructure. It's confusing because we were so used to this CARES Act, which came out first, which was this ever-moving target, if you recall, going through that of constantly being updated and contradictory, frequently asked questions. And now we are in this Rescue Act plan, which I think they're taking a lot of lessons learned. Doing it the second time, you get a little benefit of looking back. So I think they're off to a little farther start, as I said, than people would have expected. But I do expect some changes between the interim rule and the final rule. Then, pandemic response, really sort of, your healthcare workers, your frontline workers, anything to deal with the medical needs related to COVID. This is another big bucket. There's a fair amount of latitude. There's even, I would throw in this, they have like premium pay. So if there's needed to pay additional additional money to healthcare workers, or to child care workers who are taking care of the healthcare workers, or police officers. Whether you can do this as broad groups and broad categories of jobs is still a question for Treasury, or if you have to specifically identify individuals. So I can't tell you that answer yet. Treasury doesn't know the answer to those questions yet. The other thing is, last is sort of help with the economic response. And we think about that as how you invest in your community, providing additional resources to people hardest hit. So resources to businesses and business sectors, and you can even provide assistance to individuals directly. What you can't do, though, is you can't give a tax cut to a whole broad section. You can't do it like a property tax cut or a sales tax cut using these dollars. But you could give every individual in the county, I think probably would be okay to give them $100 if you wanted to do something like that. I'm just not suggesting, but I'm just saying, well, you can't do a tax cut. You could potentially do other things that provided direct payments to individuals or groups. This is not the CARES Act. This is different. And some of the things that was a big criticism of the CARES Act, again, when you're doing it the first time, you learn a lot when you do it the second time. And one of the things is that a lot of smaller communities complain because they did not get any direct payments. And, DuPage County did a pretty good job, and some states did a pretty good job of sharing the money downward. Many states did not, and many counties did not do a very good job. And so communities said, we want all of our direct payments too. So, as you're thinking about these dollars, and I think is a really important point, everybody, every city, every village, the state, everybody, regardless of size, Carroll Stream is getting direct money. Wheaton's getting direct money. Naperville's getting direct money. Aurora's getting direct money. Everybody's getting direct money. So when you're thinking about priorities, know that they're all getting their own allocations. And so, for example, I'm going to pick on where I grew up. If the Wheaton Park District is asking for money, I'm not saying don't give it to them, but know that Wheaton also got money directly. And so you guys have the ability to decide whether that's a county-wide priority or if it's something you feel that Wheaton should take care of it. Again, I'm not recommending one or the other. That's for you guys. It's a higher pay grade than me. It's for the people whose names are on the ballot to make those calls and others. But again, I just want to make sure you understand that, Wheaton and Carroll Stream and everybody got their own direct allocations. Dollars are flowing pretty quickly. As far as some of the reports that are due in August, I think, which are probably more of a staff, have staff scratching the head, as well as you all. Some more guidance and frameworks going to come out on that. And I feel bad saying that more guidance is coming, but more guidance is coming. But this interim final rule really did put us a long way down the road. This is one-time money, again, in two different tranches, a half this year, a half next year. You have a lot of flexibility in what you do. But there are definitely limitations on the infrastructure side. But, preparing for the next pandemic, or preparing or taking care of things that you had to take care of this time are all things that you can throw into the mix. The other thing I neglected on infrastructure, I did say connectivity. I hope I didn't leave that off, but broadband connectivity. And again, underserved businesses, individuals. There's a big emphasis on trying to get these dollars. Again, you can do what you want, but Treasury put an emphasis on in it. You see it through the documents and trying to get it to underserved or populations that are hardest hit and most impacted. Although there is, again, some it's not a requirement that it goes to any one group. But again, I think that was, one of the intents of Treasury is to see that, some of these underserved groups get a fair share of these, a significant share of these resources. Audits like the CARES Act, you guys are on the hook for the audits. If you give money to someone else, let's say you were to transfer it to a park district authority or another community or another jurisdiction, you're still ultimately responsible for those dollars, like in the past. The responsibility lies with you to make sure those dollars are spent adequately. There is the potential for audits down the future. So keep that in mind. The county, with the CARES Act money, did a great job of record keeping. I know it was a challenging process, but they did a great job of managing that. I know you hired some outside assistance last time to help with administering some of the CARES Act dollars. This time around, they haven't decided whether they'll allow the Rescue Act dollars to pay for people to help administer the Rescue Act dollars. So we still don't know the question. The reason why I'm saying that, keying on some of these questions, these are some of the questions that were recently asked on a couple of different calls I was on with Treasury. So I'm trying to throw out things that might be on top of mind for people. So maybe with that, I know you've got a lot of other things on the agenda. Maybe I'll stop there, give you all the opportunity to answer the question. But again, this isn't CARES Act. This is something a little bit different. But again, you have a great opportunity to really make significant impact with these dollars. And you have, the next 3.5 years to spend these dollars. You don't have to spend them today. You don't have to spend anything today. They just all have to be obligated by the end of 2024. And they have to all be spent by the end of 2026. So I want to punctuate that: obligated by 2024, spent by 2026. I think those are really key dates. So with that, I'll stop and take some questions if anybody has anything.
Any questions from the committee? I see Member Chapman.
Well, thanks so much, Bill. Thanks so much for that thorough breakdown, overview of the American Rescue Plan. A couple questions I had was, you mentioned water infrastructure a little bit, and you talked about stormwater and wastewater. What about water hookups? So if somebody was on a well and we wanted to put them on municipal water, would that be a possibility?
So I believe that qualifies under state and tribal assistance grants. I'd like to double check that, but I'm almost certain that it does. But yes, STAG's pretty broad. State and tribal assistance grants, is STAG for short, is a pretty broad account. And I do believe that does count. And I think you might even actually be able to pay for their direct hookups. That again, I want to double check that for you. But certainly infrastructure into the community you can pay for. You might be able to, and I think it's worth looking into to see if you could actually pay or subsidize their actual kind of from their house to their lot line connection. So that, I think that'd be worth exploring.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then you talked about, like assistance to individuals or, and I know we had given, like small business loans, and we've given to nonprofits, and, we have like LIHEAP to help out with heating and things like that. But so a possibility might be to set up a fund, maybe not this year, but maybe next year or something, when we don't have the stimulus money, for maybe like a fund to help people with their health insurance payments or things of that nature. We could put a little pot together, and if people were like having, because we always look at their utilities, but I'm always like, health insurance is a big cost for families, but there's never any assistance for that. And I didn't know if setting up something like that, a fund like that would be an appropriate use of these dollars.
I think probably, but I want to double check that. I know you could give them like $100. I'm pretty sure you just give them $100.
Okay.
And how you prescribe it, I'm pretty sure, but I'd like to double check, and I don't mean to be so wishy-washy on these answers, but given the fact that there's potential audits, I think precision really matters.
Sure. No, thank you. I appreciate that. And then my last question is I probably know the answer, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So what about any chance of any of these funds going towards like other capital investments like election equipment?
So the way you've done elections in the past is they probably need to be done differently because of COVID. You might need a different type of machine. You might need more machines. You might need additional resources for staffing. You might have to do things differently. So in order to qualify election equipment, I would think of it in terms of, is it applicable to doing things different in a COVID or pandemic world? Okay. Do you have to provide, more infrastructure because you have to do more mail voting? So I would think of it in terms of, this election was very different because of COVID.
Right.
And maybe you can't do all new election equipment across the board, but maybe there are chunks of this that you will now purchase that you might not have done before, or instead of getting the economy package, you now have to get the deluxe package in order to meet your needs for COVID. And and again, I'm not saying buy all the bells and whistles, but you may have to buy extra added ons because of COVID. So if you look at it in that lines, there might be bits and pieces, but probably not just across the board new election equipment.
Okay. So if we were to get maybe a new mail sorter or whatever, because more people are using mail-in because of COVID, that might be maybe part of the expense of the equipment that we could maybe use part of that for the election. So I understand what you're saying. So it's something that we should talk to our clerk about and see if we can tie any of it into COVID and reimburse those expenses. Yeah. Okay, well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your answers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
More questions, other questions from the committee? Member Garcia.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you, Bill, for being here, and really just giving us such a breakdown on this. I don't think I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know mental health issues have been huge, although before COVID, but they really exasperated during COVID. And I'm wondering if some of this money could be used for like a facility to give more help to people who need it because of the mental health issues that have become exasperated due to COVID. Or is that stretching it?
So I don't know about a facility, but I feel pretty comfortable with staffing and services. A facility I'd want to get clarification on in my mind, but services certainly seems like it'd be an appropriate expense.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Member LaPlante.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Dessart. And hi, Bill. Nice to see you again. Great. So the first time you talked to us about these funds, I take copious notes, and what you said really resonated. I wrote it down, but it's been ringing in my ears ever since. You said these are once in a lifetime funds, so make once in a lifetime plans. I would like to know, now that we have all of the rules and regulations, would you say that that statement still applies, or how would you, adjust or correct based on the outline of how these funds are to be used?
So I still think this is once in a lifetime funds. I mean, and so, yeah, I would stay by that. However, some of the flexibility I was anticipating on infrastructure, they didn't give.
Mm-hmm.
So many of us thought there was going to be a little more flexibility on that. So that was, in my mind, I don't know that disappointing is the right word, but I was hopeful that you might be able to do some big things and tie it all into jobs. But, in terms of a county, if you think about, you have the ability, if you use your 2019 fiscal year as your baseline,
Mm-hmm.
and the next 4 years, if you're, from 2020, 2021, 2022, from, the 4 years of this bill, you have the ability to offset any lost revenue, basically saying that your 2019 budget with some adjustments for inflationary, inflation, right? So your 2019 dollars aren't going to be held the same as, 2022 dollars, right? Your 2019 number will creep up a little bit. So you'll have the ability to replace, never worry about going backwards for the next 4 years if you choose to hold your dollars that way. And then, when you think about the economic impacts of this, and you think about the county, you have the ability to do some long range planning. One, in terms of, what business sectors should we be focusing on? What was the hardest hit? What communities could we best serve that maybe we didn't have the resources to serve previously? So in my mind, those are some of the things that I think these are once in a lifetime things. And this isn't a few $100,000s that you have to work with. I mean, you have tens of millions of dollars to do this. So I stand by it. Just the infrastructure was, although you have some real water needs. The question about the hookups. I mean, I know that's a real problem in certain segments of the county. It's like helping those areas that have some needs that, the budget might not always be there. So, yeah.
Okay, right. And then to follow up a little bit more about, you're saying, I hear what you're saying about you were hoping for a little bit more flexibility in terms of infrastructure. However, some of these the way you're outlining it, that perhaps if we sort of problem solved creatively, we might be able to find a way. Do you think there's wiggle room to?
As long as you don't get too cute. Right?
Okay.
As long as you don't get too cute.
All right. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. But yes, I do think there is definitely there's probably a lot you can do for the care center, probably some stuff you can do for the jail and the courthouse and just the county building. But as long as it's not too cute.
Okay. All right. Duly noted. Thank you.
That's a technical term.
I can tell.
Member Renahan.
Thank you. And thank you, Bill. I love what you're telling us here. Sounds good. It's not our first rodeo, right? So, I'm wondering, I like what you're saying about doing things that we couldn't formally, before afford to do. And one of those things I'm thinking about is transportation, maybe renting a bus or buying a bus or something like that. I'd worked with PACE about working in some low-income communities to try to get some like PACE bus type stuff. Is this something that would be a possibility?
So maybe if there was a way, if it was sort of I would think of it in terms of if you're giving them, it was like something related to healthcare because of the pandemic, or maybe if it was, something related to jobs. But
well, I'm thinking jobs.
yeah,
I mean, there would be, we were working on a study, and we thought maybe a vehicle, and then you guys kind of were putting kibosh on vehicles last round. Like,
yeah, I think that's hard. It doesn't come to mind. I don't see it right away, but listen, I promise you, with every community in the country, somebody's going to buy vehicles. It doesn't mean that they're going to not get in trouble later, but people are going to do a lot of things with these dollars. But I think I'd really have to see the justification before I felt comfortable giving an answer.
I will give you lots of amazing justifications.
I'm sure there's lots, listen, if people can't get to jobs, they can't work. I mean, we all know this. This is a real problem in this country, right? I mean, the public transportation system, particularly in the suburbs, is only so good, right? How many blocks can you work? But so I'm not disputing the need. I'm just trying to think of whether it fits, and it might be tough.
Maybe better question. I mean, is public transportation getting their own allotment?
So there is, there is some dollars that are going to the different transportation agencies. But what you might be able to do, and again, as I just am thinking about this, you might be able to give like PACE cards. I don't know what they call their bus cards, right? You might be able to do some things like that to help people out, get people to jobs, or central business districts. That could be something.
That's tough if there's no bus stop.
I hear you, right?
Appreciate it.
You give them a ticket, but if you ticket for the bus, but if there's no bus that comes to their neighborhood, it doesn't matter, right? I guess. Yeah.
Here's a question that's kind of out of the box, but I am wondering, and I know this money is meant to help people now, whether it's businesses, individuals, busing, whatever, some of the great ideas that have been mentioned here today. But what if I found out today that we're going to be asked later in the year or very shortly to approve $11 million to pay for a new parking deck? What if we banked our $89 million until such time as the interest accrued for us to be able to afford that parking deck? I see Jeff Martinowitz and Mary Catherine on from finance. I don't know what the interest rate is now or how long it would take us to accrue the interest, but it sounds like Bill is saying that we are allowed this time to use the interest for things other than what the funds are meant for. Do you know how long it would take to bank $11 million, for example, for the parking ramp? Jeff or Mary Catherine?
50 years.
That was Jim Zay?
Yeah. Interest rates are an all-time low right now.
They are at an all-time low. Okay, but we certainly can use the interest to pay off our administration fees to choose DuPage and to Lighthouse, right?
Yeah, and what you could also do is, again, any money, so take your 2019 numbers. If you were whatever percentage lower in 2020 or 2021, and you want to make the county whole, you can take those dollars. Let's say your revenue was $100 in 2019, and it was $90 in 2020. You can take $10 and backfill that into your budget, and then spend that $10 however you want. I don't use big numbers. I'm not, BA in political science. I, didn't major in finance.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Do you have a question, Members A? Okay. Bill, thank you so much for coming back time and again. And as the guidelines change, I hope you'll come on back, even if it's next week or in a month. Whenever the guidelines change, please let us know, and we want you back on.
Well, Chair, it's always a pleasure to be here. It's always great to see you all, and it's nice to be able. The one thing about this Zoom world that we are still living in to some extent it's actually been nice to be able to interact face to face with people that we maybe don't get a chance to see day in and day out. So thanks for having me, and it is always great to see you all.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mary Keating to talk about the expanded eligibility for the Community Services Block Grant. Thank you for joining us, Mary.
Sure, and I'm sorry Bill left already. I wanted to say hi to him. I've had the pleasure of meeting with Bill a couple times when I've been in Washington, and he's just such a great resource. So, yeah, what I was bringing to you today was there is a Dear Colleague letter that's being circulated in the Senate. to request that the eligibility for the Community Services Block Grant Program be sort of permanently expanded, permanently increased to 200% or below of poverty. So the CSBG program, grant program those are funds that we use for a variety of services that support low-income households, things like rent, water bills, food pantry assistance, legal assistance. We have a car seat program. It's traditionally been, the eligibility has been 125% of the poverty level, and the CARES Act increased it to 200%. So when those CARES Act funds are exhausted, we'll be returning back to the 125% of poverty. One of the real challenges when you're talking about programs that are based on the federal poverty level is they don't make any distinction regarding the cost of living in different places within the country. So, you know, 125% of poverty is a number that's set at the federal level. It doesn't recognize that the cost of living in DuPage County is significantly different than the cost of living in Adams County or some other area in downstate Illinois or in other states. So there's a Dear Colleague letter being circulated in the Senate. We'd love to have our we'd love to approach our senators and ask them to sign on to it, but obviously that's a decision that the legislative committee would need to kind of chime in on so that we can reach out to them.
Questions or comments for Mary?
No, I just think, if I may, I think, you know, we should get on that and support that if we can. I think it would open up that block grants. I think it's a good suggestion. So do we have to put it on the next agenda? I don't know how do we go forward with it?
Cheryl?
I think Mary's got a draft letter that we can kind of make into our own draft letter. I don't know that we necessarily have to vote on it. I guess I defer to the state's attorney, but we could draft a letter and circulate it among the members. I don't know, do we need to vote on it or not? We typically don't on something like this, but
okay.
No,
I don't think we really need to. It's more of a policy decision. At this point, I know Chairman Cronin in the past has written, you know, when there seems to be a consensus of the board on certain issues like this, that, you know, but to do a support letter, I think we could just do the letter unless someone has an objection on the call.
Does this committee, do we have a consensus on support? All right, let's work on it this week then, Cheryl. Thank you.
Sure, we'll send it out for your approval. Is that okay, Mary?
Mary, she said we'll send it out for your approval. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't do that.
Thank you. Anything else to add?
You know, one thing I would add is that farther down the road, I'd love to see all these federal programs based on the area median income. That's how all of the HUD programs are established. And it, like I said, it recognizes that the cost of living is very different in different parts of the country. So, you know, the programs that come from, you know, federal HHS money has this much lower threshold than programs that are funded through HUD. So I'd love to see that consistently adopted, but obviously that's for a discussion for another day. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Cheryl, that's something we can look at for our 2022 legislative agenda.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Okay, thanks for your support.
Next we have Linda Zerwin to talk about the 9/11 or 911 wireless surcharge update. Linda?
Hello,
thank you for being with us.
Oh, anytime. I'm happy to come anytime. Just Cheryl suggested that I give you a little bit of background for those of you that are newer. Sorry, members A. So about 7 years ago, the state of Illinois created a 911 Services Advisory Board. I have been a member of that board since it originated, representing the 8 largest counties in the state of Illinois, so a large cross section. That group undertook, and also there are members of 911 and the telecom groups. Cable was added later, Police Chiefs Association, Fire Chiefs Association. So it's kind of the larger representation of what the makeup of a local board, ETSB board would be. That group undertook a huge reform of the 911 bill 7 years ago. And that bill has a built-in sunset, or that statute has a built-in sunset of roughly 3 years to check the progress of the things that were decided in the statute, namely consolidation and the preparation for the replacement of the 911 statewide network from copper to fiber. So this is why we see a sunset every couple of years to check that progress. The progress of the consolidation, and you through Chairman Shorzy, get a copy of the monthly report from ETSB, and that talks about the legislation we're following and some other things. But through that, consolidation statewide, here in DuPage, we've gone from 22 to 2, but across the state, we've gotten rid of, around 100 different PSAPs and combined systems to become more efficient. So that's why this rolls. So House Bill 3702 has been the bill that has been working under Representative Willis for the reform language or any changes we've made. That's gone extremely well because unlike other statutes, you have this advisory board representing everybody working together on any legislative changes and making that recommendation. Each year that there is a sunset, they add a minority leader and a majority leader representative from the state, from the Senate rather, and from the representative house. So then they bring those bills forward. So it was Representative Willis that was moving through. There were some amendments, namely Chicago, and then it was handed off to Senator Cunningham as it passed out of the House. Word today is that will be combined with the small cell, so House Bill 2379, the Small Cell Wireless Facilities Deployment Act, and the language for prevailing wage. So, this makes it a little bit trickier in terms of how you support or not support these types of bills. On the 911 side, assuming on the language comes over as written and as it has appeared in its original House bill, it's a good thing, and it's a good start for the next 3 years. It would continue to surcharge for 3 years. Your support then becomes tricky because there's some issues with small cell and prevailing wage, which is strategic, of course. So from the 911 side, it's good to go. The rest of it is up to you. The ETSB does not typically do witness slips. We follow, if we were, we would be a proponent of the language because it had been submitted by the advisory board. So that's the main bill in terms of sunset and the $1.50 surcharge continuation. The other, I can stop there for questions if you'd like. I just have one other bill that we're following that I'll update you on. Any questions?
Okay, are there any questions from the committee about this right now? Okay, go ahead, Lyndon, tell us about the other bill.
Sure, the other one we're following, interestingly enough, is House Bill 2784, which is mental health. And the reason that we're following that is there was significant or is significant language relating to what 911 dispatch centers would have to do regarding the changes in the mental health and the responses. APCO, which is the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials, and NENA, which is the National Emergency Number Association, have state chapters. Those groups, APCO and NENA, have worked well with the writers of this bill. I've sat in on some of those meetings as well to bridge the gaps in the holes that we found in terms of how we execute what they're trying to accomplish. And one of the results of that was to create an advisory board, including mental health and fire service and law enforcement, because they realized that the way this is written, there's some operational issues, and it'll be regional, but it'll also be a state oversight board to set some guidelines, particularly on the reporting aspect. If there's no language to tell us what to collect, it becomes, and if it's not standardized, think the traffic stop profiling cards that they did. If it's not standardized, then the data that they're trying to collect becomes useless. So there's a lot of discussion about that. So based on where that's at, APCO and NENA have also decided to remain neutral on it, but are supporting it. If that language, there's a Senate floor amendment to bring in the discussion language. It's one of those amendments that is really a lot of shorthand, so it took a while to go through, but we believe everything that we're interested in for 911 is in that bill. So those are the two major things that are happening right now.
Thank you so much for coming in and presenting that. That's very interesting. Any questions from the committee or comments? Member Garcia.
Just real quick, what was the number of the bill for the mental health advisory?
58, it's House Bill 2784.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Linda. Come on back anytime you have new legislation to talk about. Next up, we have Cheryl Marquet to talk about some of the Springfield legislation.
Sure, thank you, Chair. As you know, there's a week left in the spring session. They certainly have a lot to do. I guess we're going to be in late Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It'll be a fun weekend for Chip and I. They do have a lot of issues still on the calendar, though. They have the state budget. We still don't know about the 10% cut to LGDF. That would be, you know, $1 million cut for us because we do get over $10 million a year in local government funds. We still don't know about redistricting and if they're going to move that July 1st date. There's marijuana dispensary rules changes, healthcare issues. We haven't seen a trailer bill yet on the Safety Act, ethics, the 911. So there are a lot of issues still to be resolved. I guess on the good news, House Bill 1711, the puppy mill bill, we did get it finally posted for a committee. It's on Thursday.
Woo! Yay!
So that's really good, but I think we'll get it out of committee. We have the votes to get it out of committee. It's just, will the leadership call the bill before the 31st? It hasn't been amended, so it doesn't have to go back to the House. We just need to get it out of committee on Thursday, which I'm pretty confident about, but they just have to call it, right? So we're close. Animal Services has been great. They did messaging all weekend that Chip and I looked at. They've made tons of calls. So it's the closest we've ever gotten, and we feel pretty good about it. As Linda mentioned, the small cells, it's a complicated subject matter that goes back to the 2018 bill. We fought that bill tooth and nail just because it took all local authority to cite your devices in your communities, right? So 3 months after we lost the bill in Springfield, the FCC did issue a ruling that it supersedes the state law, but some of the items in the FCC ruling are covered in the state law. So if the state law went away, we'd have a little more wiggle room, I can't think of a better term, to cite devices in our communities. Of course, I knew the telecoms were gonna let this go because the Small Cell Wireless Deployment Act, it sunsets in June. So even though the one bill, House Bill 2379 that Member Renahan mentioned did die, Illinois Municipal League has been negotiating with the telecoms, and I'm trying to get ISACO involved to come up with some language. Okay, if you extend this act, let's extend it 3 years instead of 5, and throw us a little bit of a bone and give us a little more local authority to cite these devices so they're not in somebody's front yard, they're not at a school. The problem is the small cell devices, which Linda can speak to, they have to be close together. That's how they work. So they can't be really far apart. So we're supposed to see some language. I talked to IML and ISACO last night. There's supposed to be some language today that I'll share with the committee. So that's still going. The energy bill, you've probably been reading a lot about in the paper. You got ComEd, you've got all the different parties involved. I sent you the letter this morning because I wanted you to know we have been besieged, well, the chairman has, with letters from downstate counties that are upset because in this massive bill, which we haven't seen all of it yet, the clean energy bill, it sets almost like small cell, like shot clocks almost, to when you're citing wind or solar energy facilities. You know, some counties downstate will just say no forever, right? They have their own ordinances, and I understand that, but they also want to put in some reasonable timeframes. But again, it's local authority. So ISACO is trying to be part of these discussions to say, please recognize local authority when you're citing wind and solar devices. It's not as much of an issue here, but downstate, it's a really big issue. So ISACO is trying to be at the table on those discussions. a couple of bills the committee was supporting did not advance. So Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti's housing bill, that House Bill 2775, it didn't make it out of a Senate committee. There was House Bill 813 that would have funded and coordinated with rail carriers some additional projects to keep people from trespassing on railroad property. I mean, Member Chaplin knows as part of the Railroad Safety Council, suicide has been a huge issue. And that bill got out of the House, but it didn't advance in the Senate. So that didn't pass. And then there were a few others. And I guess the one good news is Senate Bill 643 that would have required our health department to report to IDPH in the event of emergency. We did defeat that bill because again, it strips local authority. I mean, that's what you see in Springfield a lot. And members, they can attest to this. It's taking local authority and taking local revenues. And those are always bills we fight together with ISACO, but that's something we continue to monitor. So I'll send some updates out as I get them over the weekend, if you're interested.
Yeah, you were so great at that. Thank you for sending all that out. I did have one question. I don't recall the number, but that kind of companion bill with the humane ordinance bill, it's the one about predatory lending.
Right, that was House Bill 572, and that's on final passage in the Senate.
Oh, good. Good.
Passed that flew through committee. I thought there would have been some objection, but there wasn't. So that should pass. Yeah.
Good. That's excellent. All right. Any questions for Cheryl about Springfield legislation? All right. Any old business? Thank you so much, Cheryl, again, for all of your work. And I get your updates on the weekends. I don't know when you have time off because you're working 24/7. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. Any old business right now? Except for the fact that Member Zay 1970 called and wants its paneling back. I kid. I'm kidding. Any new business? All right. Motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Thank you, Member Zay. Second. Roll call, please.
Chaplin, second. Member Chaplin, second.
Yes.
Yeah.
Member.
Vice Chair Zay.
Aye.
Member Chaplin.
Aye.
Chair Dessart.
Aye.
Member LaPlante.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Renahan.
I think she had to go.
Okay. And Member Salmon.
All right. Thank you so much. I will see you next week. Kidding, Member Zay. Just kidding.